All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I see everybody skated here as well as I did here. It's a little bit icier than I got out there going, whoa, especially that parking lot out there. So. Well, it's great to have such a big crowd in here. It's amazing what a week later we'll do versus below zero to 35 above zero. So, other than being a little icy out there, it's great to have you all here. What I want to talk to you about, I call it, is creating regenerative landscapes. But as you see this picture and carefully study this picture, what do you see going on?
Cows.
You got cattle?
Range management.
What was that?
Range management.
Range management. This picture was taken in late August. It's in north central Nebraska. Run the next slide, or just click on it. But what I want to help you understand, focus on, is understanding what's going on with our landscape, the dynamics, the biological processes, the ecosystem processes. I call it working with God's creation. And that when God created this wonderful earth in 7 days, or 6 days as the Bible tells us, it gives us an idea of what we don't understand is the great complexity in the interactions. God was just absolute genius. But this is full of life. And this is not by accident, this is by design. Through very careful grazing management stewardship of this land, this is the end of the growing season. And we're harvesting a tremendous amount of sunshine. And when the sun interacts with the plants, there's a magical process called photosynthesis. And that's how, if we're wanting to help the earth sequester carbon, get the carbon dioxide, the CO2 out of the air, we need to understand this photosynthetic process. Because when that sun hits these plants, this volume of plants, it captures that sunshine. That sunshine hits the plants grab onto the CO2, it's called carbon dioxide. To a plant, what we need to understand, what we call waste, and it's a problem on this earth because it is too high right now. You know what carbon dioxide is to a plant? It's life. Like when we breathe in, we suck in the air. Our body uses the O2 in that air to live. That plant absorbs the CO2, works with the photosynthetic process, and you know what the byproduct of plants harvesting sunshine is?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. Oxygen to a plant is waste. We never think of that. Next slide, Brent. So I took this picture back about, since 2015. So about 9 years ago. This was in the U.S. Botanical Garden in Washington, D.C., part of the Smithsonian Institute. It was created by the National Geographic. And it is a remarkable display. Our tendency is only to look at what's above ground. But I want to talk about what's going on below ground. Because that's where we put the carbon. When that plant captures that sunshine and those green leaves above that ground, and it goes, okay, I'm producing all this carbon, it's producing green plant material above ground. But to support that green plant material is an unbelievable root system underneath the ground. And when it starts harvesting extra carbon, it starts sending it into the roots. And that's where it gets stored. It's called organic matter, and we need to understand that process. It's called carbon sequestration. What people don't realize, again, what we see above ground, there is, on most time averages, there's 10 times more plant volume below ground than there is above ground. And so when you start looking at that, and I tell people what you manage above ground is mirrored below ground, but I'm going to use a bluegrass yard. I keep everything this short. What's the root system like? I let it get this tall, which is displayed up here. They had to tie knots in these roots. That's a person who's probably about 5'6", 5'8", and you can see we had to tie roots in these because it just otherwise would have drug on the floor. These roots will go 8 to 10 feet on the tall grass prairie, and that's where I grew up, in South Nebraska. That's what created the rich prairies, the rich farming soils that we use today. And that's where that carbon goes. Look how dark this soil is. And not only that, this shows mainly grasses, but I really want to talk about the biological diversity. Its great complexity is illustrated here. Next slide, Brenda. This is a carbon cycle. And as we talk about climate change and CO2, as it says, what are you focusing on? If we're to help this Earth, I think we've got to do more than just simply shut down the cars, kill the power plants, shut down the factories, which are emitting CO2. Is what we're not talking about, or talking very little about, is the other end of this loop, clear over here, and asking, why is the world, the Earth, not sucking the carbon back out of the ground as fast as we're putting it into the air? That's where the biological process is breaking down. Through, I'm going to say, our mismanagement of the Earth's surface, this isn't working like it used to, like it did 2, 3, 4, 500 years ago. So not only, I'm not going to say we can't work on here, which I think we need to reduce our carbon emissions, but we also have to ask the big question, what can we do on the other end of this cycle? How can we make the Earth suck that carbon right back out of the air? So how can we grow more plants? Because as we know more, we have more plants. Guess what plants need? Carbon dioxide. So this is what we need. I'm going to talk to you about is I'm going to talk to you today about this part right here. Is what is going on or not going on this Earth. Next slide, Brandon. Why don't you slide the chair there? Just a little closer. One of the things I want to also share is our vehicles, our power plants are not the only thing putting carbon dioxide in the air. As you can see in that upper left-hand corner, there is a tremendous forest fire going on. It could be Canada, it could be the United States, it could be Russia, but as we have documented in the last, I'm going to say since I moved to Bozeman in '88, ever since about '88, the fires of Yellowstone, we have documented enormous fires. And they are putting tons of carbon back into the air. In that those trees, part of the problem with forestry management is the trees will store carbon, and it is in the form of all the bark and the wood and the trees. And when that burns, where does it go? Into the air. So through Smokey the Bear and so forth, we have been accumulating 100+ years of dead plant material in our forests. To where now it's a tinderbox, it's gasoline, lightning strike, we can't put it out anymore. So we've got to start looking at how we manage our forests and other things. We also, as we know, we've read, the Arctic is warming up and the tundra is melting, and as it exposes that peat moss, that begins to break down, and that emits methane and CO2 as well. So it's contributing to the global warming that's going on. Then we have volcanoes. I just again heard the news, there's another volcano, I think in Indonesia, that's blowing its top today. And there's about 3 or 4 of them going on right now. And that's continuing to contribute to the CO2 and various other gases into the air. And then we see that buffalo clear in the upper right-hand corner. And history documents, they never counted, but they estimate there was 60 million buffalo roaming the plains of North America. In addition to all the animals that are in Africa and everywhere else. And as wonderful as that creature is, it ruminates. It belches and farts, pardon the expression. And when it does so, it emits methane and CO2. Just like when you and I in this room are breathing, I'm taking in oxygen. What am I expelling? CO2. That's part of the process. We've got to quit nailing, we've got to quit worrying about that process. We've got to figure out how do we work with the process rather than trying to shut it down. And even composting, if you don't quite do it right, even compost, as it starts creating heat, it is emitting gases. So it's part of that biological process. I'm not going to start composting. Buffalo, there's a big push right now to get rid of or reduce the number of cattle, dairy cattle, pigs, hogs, sheep, everything else, because we're worried about the methane they're exuding. It's not the animal that's the problem. It's how we're managing it that's the problem. So that we need to understand. We've got to quit targeting specific things, like whether it's cars, power plants, or animals, to solve our problems. Next slide.
You put rice up there too, because rice is a big one.
Absolutely. That's, I was going to say, we can go right now in the ballpark and start just listing problem after what we perceive as problems. What I've been working in most of my life, as I now think back on it, I worked for the government for about 8 years, then in a nonprofit for another 8 years, but mainly my whole career has been involved in agriculture. And really about the last 20, I've been involved in regenerative agriculture, and I love this description that comes from Kiss the Ground. But regenerative agriculture I look at as a noun. It describes farming, grazing practices that, amongst other benefits, reverses climate change by rebuilding soil organic matter and restoring degraded soil biodiversity, resulting both in carbon drawdown and improving the water cycle. Specifically, it's a holistic land management practice that leverages the power of photosynthesis in plants to close the carbon cycle and build soil health, crop resilience, and nutrient density. Next slide. There are really 6 core principles to those people that are trying to practice this approach. The first one is you got to understand the context. To get into regenerative agriculture, we've got to change our mindset. And it's one, I can tell you, working with agricultural people, it's the most difficult one to overcome. Especially if people have been involved in conventional agriculture for eons of time. To let go of the old ideas and adapt the new is very, very difficult. If I could change it like that, I would, but I can't. I can't change your thinking, anyone's thinking in here. The next one, once I got that mindset, we need to start looking at, we need to minimize soil disturbance. The ranchers, farmers that are practicing this have stopped using the big plow, the disc, the big tractors, and making the ground bare. We've got to get rid of that tillage equipment. It is very adverse to our lifestyle, the health of the earth, and some of those things. We've got to maximize crop diversity. We want to keep that soil surface covered. We want to maintain a living root in the soil year round and integrate livestock back into our farming practices. Livestock, chickens, our whole meat industry has become industrialized. We put all the animals into small square boxes, buildings, warehouses, wherever, and then we haul the feed to them. That is the problem. The farm I grew up on, I grew up in south central Nebraska around Grand Island. I reflect back that very first farm, we had chickens, we had pigs, we had geese, but none of it was confined. It was running out on the land. I remember slaughtering animals out on the land. Not the way we do it today, but we did it there on the farm. The environment was completely different. And that has changed in the last 50 years tremendously, and that's part of our problem. If we have animals, where do we put them? How do we manage it? It's not the animal, it's how we're doing it. Next slide. What gut response does this picture give you? Does it look like we're great stewards of the land, of the earth? No. Next slide, Brendan, just put that up there. It says, thank the U.S. farmers for feeding the world. And that's what their current research shows, is estimating again, but agriculture is contributing between 10 to 15% of the carbon dioxide to the air. And it's these machines that are doing it, and a lot of other things are doing as well. But this is not what I think God wanted us to do. I grew up in the Midwest, around Grand Island, Nebraska, the Corn Belt, and I find myself, since I moved to Bozeman, not having great pleasure going back there. Seeing millions of acres of cornfields does not excite me. Seeing the diversity we have out here, the national wonders, the parks, and everything else is what God still created. Gives me excitement. Next slide, Brenda. And that's the stained glass window in this church. Does this picture with all the combines reflect that? No. We have skewed out. So we need to look at some of God's directives to us, how we're managing the landscape, and challenge, say, can we do better? Because the consequence, what is the cost of accomplishing this, is we've got thousands of millions of acres of whatever crop it might be. It could be corn, it could be wheat fields here in Montana, soybean fields. But when we grow our crops, we do it in such large scale anymore because we got these mammoth machines. And what did we displace? Everything else, other than the one single crop. And the earth is telling us that is not sustainable. That's not healthy. We need to make some changes. Next slide. As I gave you some numbers, 476 billion tons of carbon have been emitted from the farmland soil due to inappropriate farming practices. That's an estimate. Tilling these soils causes the soil's organic matter, the organic matter that we stored with all those roots and interactions. When you start tilling it, it causes oxygen to enter the soil. It causes then the organic matter to oxidize. That releases carbon dioxide back into the air. Every time we start tilling it and mixing it, we are losing and destroying what God created. Compared to the 276 gigatons emitted from burning fossil fuels. So we've got to keep things in balance, but when you start seeing farm fields like this, it's telling me that soil is not healthy. It's turning the soil that was dark and beautiful, black, gray, to a dust type material. And we call it dirt versus soil, or dust. Next slide. Regenerative agriculture shifts the paradigm. Here are some of the challenges. Our old school of thinking, I grew up on the farm, was we got to compete with nature. So we get our big tillage equipment, we get rid of everything but the one crop we want to grow. So we get the big discs out, the plows out, we destroy it. The change is we've just got to learn to start partnering with nature. On the right-hand side, you can see we're growing multiple crops, great diversity, great health. We've got to quit disturbing the soil, we've got to protect the soil. We've got to think beyond monocultures, start figuring out how can we grow multiple crops. And we've got I call it a reductionist approach, which is a singular approach, which is on the left. I'm focusing on only one entity, the crop, versus I'm really trying to understand all of life, including in the soil and above the soil, all the wildlife, bugs, bees, and everything else. Next slide. I'm not going to show it. There's a great video. It's a Common Ground film, Kiss the Ground. I'm going to hand out a piece of paper, so if you don't want to write all these things down, I'm going to give you some books to recommend to read some of those things at the end of my presentation. I'll give you all of these references. But this is a great book also. It's by Josh Tickle. It's Kiss the Ground, How the Food You Eat Can Reverse Climate Change, Heal Your Body, and Ultimately Save the World. It came out in 2016, I think. It's now been a little over about, 8-9 years. It's a nonprofit. And again, they got some great films. You can just YouTube it. YouTube, type in Kiss the Ground and it will show what's available. You can actually, we can come back into this room. They're going to come out with another feature film right now. And a lot of times we have to rent those, but if the desire is there, we can bring you right back here. That's where we can have this continuing discussion. That's my intent today, is to perk your curiosity. and then we can make some changes together. Next one. This is a picture of me. I'm on my knees right in the center there, and I've got this group of students around me. This is at North Star Bison in Rice Lake, Wisconsin. Again, this is late September, mid-September, about September 20th if I remember right. And I am teaching this class called Holistic Bison Management. And we're talking about the ecological processes, but rather than doing it in the classroom, and the world was just in great glory on this ranch, I said, let's go out on the pasture and learn. So I got this group of students, and I'm saying, what do we see happening above the ground, below the ground? How can we learn from what we see happening here? Again, we're standing in a sea of grass. This is not by accident, it is by design, working with this ranch, North Star Bison. They are running buffalo, but I've also worked with cattle producers in Wisconsin and some regular farmers across mostly the West. I've done seminars in every western state west of the Mississippi. I've even done some east of the Mississippi, but most of my focus has been this side of the world. And we are just studying what's going on. Again, thinking of the biological processes. We've got this much volume feed, and this has been grazed once or I think twice now. This is, again, the whole intent is to stockpile this feed to carry the buffalo into the winter. Wisconsin gets about as much snow, or at times more than we do here. And so how do we keep those animals alive? We've got to grow a tremendous amount of feed. And we stockpile. And yes, it will snow, but the buffalo have learned underneath that 3 or 4 foot of snow is this sea of grass. We already see it in Yellowstone all the time. They take their big heads and swoop back and forth. If there's feed underneath there, they will eat it. Next slide. I said one of the principles is keeping a living root feeding the soil all year long. Again, this is late September, and look at what we're still harvesting. All that sunshine. We're still capturing carbon and sequestering carbon back in the roots. Next slide. Or just click next. If you look beyond those buildings, that's the neighbor across the road there. This is what their field looks like. We're harvesting corn. Are we still harvesting sunshine at this state? No, through our genetics, we have created what we call 110-day corn. We plant it 1st of May. By the middle of September, it is cured out. We're ready. We'll be ready to harvest this field in about 15, 20 days. And it's done. And how many millions of acres of this do we have? How many days of the year are there?
65.
How many days do we have a green growing plant in that field?
110.
Maybe 100. Because we plant that corn crop, it doesn't come up right away. It's pretty spindly. The sun, for about the first 60 days, is hitting mostly bare ground until we get that corn plant this tall. So that's part of our problem, is we have shifted millions of acres of this earth, whether it be wheat, beans, corn, to we're harvesting. We're growing great crops, and we're feeding the people of the world, but it is at a cost. And the earth is telling us the cost may be too high. Next slide. I said one of the principles is we want to keep the soil surface covered. You want to use minimum or no till, and that's what they planted as a field of beans, soybeans, and they did not disc it, they did not plow it. They come in there and kind of rotary hoed the corn stalks to get them knocked down, but they went in there. What we don't think about is the earth is like our bodies. If I fall down and skin my knees, skin my elbows, what's my body begin to immediately go back to doing?
Heal it.
Heal it. You bear off the earth, whether it be fire, tillage equipment, what does the earth try to do right away? Or your garden. I'm going to use I love to garden. I'm going to talk about that. Mother Nature, if I make this as bare as this tabletop, is going to stay bare. Weeds. We call them weeds. Weeds are bad. My parents taught me a long time ago weeds are bad. So I try to kill it back, and I keep keeping this earth bare through using all this extra tillage. Now we've got herbicides, because all I want to grow is that one crop. Well, so we've got to start thinking of that principle, much like our bodies is constantly trying to heal itself. If we start working with Mother Nature, she is remarkably resilient, fast. We're just constantly fighting against her. Next slide. This is a crop field. It's on Gabe Brown's, on a Mandan, North Dakota. It's called cocktail cover crop. It has got over 20 different plants planted out here. These are annual plants. It's got radishes, canola, wheat, barley, rye, corn plants, sunflowers, radishes, and several I can't even remember what's all out there. Now, if you're a bee or a bumblebee or a butterfly, what is this?
Salad.
Smorgasbord.
If we had more of the earth covering this, looking like this, would we have problems? I don't believe we'd have near the problems that we have today. And this is part of it. It's called a cocktail cover crop. Gabe Brown grows it. And so part of the problem becomes, okay, if this is my crop, how do I harvest it? As good as John Deere is, they have yet to create a combine that will sort this much stuff. Next slide, Brenda. So that's why we got to have these four-legged black creatures called cows, sheep, lambs, buffalo, whatever you want to put out there. They love eating this stuff. They'll eat a lot of it. They will return approximately 50% of the plant material you see above ground back to the soil surface. Because they're clumsy. Got these big feet. And they don't care what they stand on. But do you think the buffalo, if you've ever gone to Ted Turner's or looked at the ones in Yellowstone, do they worry about what they step on? That's part of the biological process. That's what God's design was. We take some, we return a lot. So we're feeding the soil. We're feeding all the bugs, the bees, the butterflies, and we have unbelievable wildlife. Gabe says that his biggest problem is, because he's growing this cocktail cover crop, is he will have the deer come from 10, 20 miles onto all his places because it's the only green spot out on this earth. He's got all the pheasants and everything else. He can have just a business just on wildlife alone. Next slide. Let me tell you about Gabe's journey. And if it intrigues you, here's his book. The title of it is Dirt to Soil, One Family's Journey into Regenerative Agriculture, written by Gabe Brown. Now, Gabe, you would think, okay, he grew up on a farm. As you can see, he did not. He was a city kid. Though his soul wanted to be back on the land. So he kept volunteering, working with neighboring farmers, and he eventually found his wonderful wife, and his wife's parents owned the farm. So he married into it, as they say. I think part of Gabe's ability to change was he wasn't seated and stuck with doing things the traditional way for the last 20 years. And when he got onto the farm, as you said, his parents owned the farm. They ended up buying the farm in '91 because Gabe wanted to make these changes. He didn't like what the soil was telling him, what the crops were doing, and the land looked like. His father-in-law kept fighting him, blocking his one of the changes he wanted to make. So he bought him out. Had to borrow a lot of money. So in '91 they bought the farm. As you see, in '95 to '98,
Well, I hate to interrupt the presentation here, but technical difficulties have made it necessary to cut out a small section of what Roland is saying and the video here. But we'll let you see the rest of it right now.
Why am I so smart? Or why am I so dumb and going so smart? Because we went out into the pastures, those hailstorms impacted it. It didn't kill everything. It rebounded fairly quickly. But because of the farming practices that he was practicing, which is a lot of chemicals at that time, he was getting into no-till, he was using a lot of chemicals. Well, if I get my corn crop paled out, I've got residual herbicides that prevent me from planting anything else until next year. This is fairly standard practice, whether it be soybeans, wheat, or corn, or any other agricultural crop, we're using various chemicals. Keep the weeds out, because the weeds are bad. So he got, in 98, he started his journey into regenerative agriculture, and that's what that book was about. Next slide. Here are some of the successes. It's been written about, documented. He's got various scientists and researchers studying what's going on. Dave has been growing corn, he's still growing corn, but on a much smaller scale, because he grows a lot of cocktail cover crops where he's got cattle. But he still grows corn crops, and what he does, his average yield has been 127 bushels per acre, while the county average is 100 bushels per acre. What's not up there is he can grow 127 bushels of corn, no fertilizer. He's created a soil that rich, high in organic matter, he does not have to put up any fertilizer. Minimal chemicals. So if I have to put on any fertilizer, I'm using almost no tillage other than no-till drill. What do you think his profits are on growing 127 bushel corn with very few inputs? Much higher than the conventional averages. So it's a win-win situation. Becoming regenerative should cost you your financial farm, because if you're losing money, don't down that farm very long. Is organic matter with the cropping rotations of cocktail cover crops a whole going at regenerative approach? He has increased his soil organic matter on his cropland from 1.8 over 6%. Some of it's approaching 8%. 3 to 4-fold increase. Take carbon out of the air, putting it in soil. I'll give you those numbers here in a moment, how big that is. Because of his success, and because he's also on the promotional tour, Gabe did what I did. I talked to him last year, 2 years ago. I said, hey, because he's doing a lot of talks and conferences, he's all over the world. He was on the road giving over 200 presentations 2 years ago. I go, what the heck do you farm? Because I don't. My son does, my other employee, my other family members, but he believes it that much. So because of the story he carries, on average we have about 2,000 people tour the ranch every year. And if you are interested, I can make a couple phone calls, and we can get on a bus and go look at it if you want. There's things we can also look at in Montana, we don't have to go very far. What does he produce? He actually has his own labels called Nourished by Nature. He produces and sells grass-fed finished beef, lamb, pasture pork, turkeys, chickens, eggs, honey, maple syrup, garden vegetables, and he does sell some corn and wheat. And if he's like, most of his crops go into the animals, something like that. But he's highly profitable. The last one, on a 5,000-acre farm, there are now 4 families living on the Brown farm. Is that average for North Dakota or Montana? How many people on a 5,000-acre farm in Montana do you think live on that farm? 1. And the wife works in town because the farm is losing too much money. There's quite full. Next one. What was that? That's what soil's supposed to look like, folks. What does carbon when we take it in soil look like in organic matter? Look how black it is. you go in your garden, or if you got a yard, or again, if you got some friends, just take a shovel and start looking at it and look, what do you find in that soil? I remember digging holes on that farm I grew up on. I could dig 7 to 6, 7, 8 foot hole. It's what digging, don't remember why, but and it would be charcoal black, this black, for 6 to 8 feet. I go that ticky there where I grew up on, about 4 feet, is as gray as this carpet. What do we do the organic matter? It's up in the air. Alright, according to Penn State, soil organic matter, SLM, you see that acronym, is roughly 58% carbon. To increase the soil organic matter by 1%, you need to add additional 20,000 pounds of SLM or 11,600 pounds of carbon per acre. And how much you gain ground increases your organic matter? 3 or 4 fold. So that's how much carbon he's taken out of the air and put into the ground on every acre. And that's what we need to replicate and do a lot better of across the whole globe. Next slide. This is where I have hope. We're not changing as quick as I want, but there are roughly, this is from USDA from 207 till maybe a little bit dated, there's 406 million acres of cropland in the U.S. 48 states today. If we could increase the organic matter just 1% across the board, how many tons of carbon is that? Take that times 5.75. That's what we sucking out of the air. The pasture land, there are 741,000 or 471 million acres of range unpastured land across the United States today. With the innovative grazing practices, I'm still working with several ranches here in Montana. They're getting paid right now for sequestering carbon through changing and adapting through adaptive grazing management, as I call it. We are sequestering carbon. And we're increasing that pasture on the rangeland than we are the problem. That's where I get hope. So again, I'm going to say you can take that times 2, or take times 10 tons per that acreage. How much carbon will we suck out of the air? A lot. That's where I have the hope. So I drive a hybrid, Brandon and I drive a hybrid, so we reduce some of our carbon footprint. So this is where my energy is going, is working with these people, has been. I'm trying to retire, though I'm still working part-time. There's 671,000 acres, 671 million acres of forest and woodlands. I am not a forester, but I know we need to do a lot better than we have been, and especially our managing our western forests and western woodlands. And when we are trying to worry about the 80 million acres of cities and highways, it's kind of all under concrete, but I think we'd be better there. And then there's wilderness mountains and parks like Montana has. So to increase soil organic matter, 1% requires 5.75 tons of carbon per acre, and those 2 top figures, that is over 1 billion acres. So I take that times, so we could easily sequester 10 to 20 billion tons annually, suck it out of the air of carbon, and that would move us forward very badly next slide. So what can Hope's Creative Care team do to help promote regenerative agriculture? These are my ideas. I don't want to speak for the Hope Creative Care Committee, but these are my thoughts. I believe we need to provide accurate information to you that promotes sustainable food products that are locally raised to help people understand the whole carbon footprint for all the food you eat. Help create connections. Facilitate face-to-face interaction between us and the farmers and ranchers that making it happen, whether it be in Gallup Valley or other farmers in Montana or even beyond the state. Get involved with the WSCA's Western Sustainability Exchange, is a nonprofit out of Lakeland, Great organization, I've been working with them. Kiss the Ground, another nonprofit, that's the film that I want you to watch. And then there's Kroos, they're out of Santa Fe, New Mexico, but they have directors here in Montana that I'm working with right now, helping ranchers do some very extensive grazing management. And then change how we see things. From what you see happening in your backyard to what's happening in the rest of Montana or beyond, when you see a field, you understand how it's functioning or not functioning. You may not be able to change it, but at least you now have a level of understanding when we start communicating and supporting one another. Next slide. This is actually off of our website for creative care. I don't like it, so that's why I put it up here. But I think it tells the wrong message. It goes, how do we start a vegan? How would we help the planet? I've seen it again, not just off of Creative Care website, but there's been posted on the internet several times. You want to help the planet stop eating meat, stop eating dairy products, stop eating cheese. All the things dealing with animals. Is that really going to help? What if that state that I see on the left was down here in Montana, less than 150 miles away, on a very sustainable ranch, versus the vegetables on the right that you're buying, and how many green vegetables are we producing in Montana right now when it's 35 below zero? So where do they come from? Central America, Mexico, South America, where the climate is the opposite of where we are here. What does that cost us? How much carbon is put into that? Give me an avocado, guacamole, fresh lettuce. Carrots we can grow here. I'm still eating potatoes out in the garden. So, something we can produce, a lot of things, especially if we want things fresh, we don't even think about it. And most of it comes out of California. Desert, it's supposed to be desert until we irrigate it. So how sustainable is that? We need to know where our food comes from and how it's produced. We need to ask those questions. Is it a lot of work? Yes. But with this smartphone technology, and they're getting better, they put all those little cue cards on there. And I'm working with ranchers, and I'm encouraging ranchers that I want to know, I look at the steak, and it's in Whole Foods, Safeway, wherever, and I want to store it. I should be able to take my phone out, hit that code, and it gives me the story. But then I want to visit. That's how we need to start buying our food. We need to know the background of all the food we're eating. We don't. It's a lot of work. On extra effort. Next slide. Corn. Again, a lot of the emphasis I keep reading is like they say like all the corn is going into these animals. That's why we're going to stop eating the animals because it's contributing to global warming. But 40% of the corn crop today is going to produce ethanol. And you know that's about to double because they're right now working on they allow 15% of your gasoline to be, they're going to E15, which means we're going to increase that by 50%. Is that sustainable? And I was made, we just Brenda and I went on a trip last year to Europe, Germany mostly, and I couldn't believe all the corn that they were going there. Every squirrel. And it's because of fuel. They're doing the same thing there that we are here. But is that sustainable? Next slide. Here's some numbers. This from Cornell University takes about 26.1 pounds of corn to produce 1 gallon of ethanol. However, this is not a very efficient process. It requires more energy to make ethanol from the grain than the combustion of the ethanol produces. The process is also very expensive, with feedstock costing $1.05 per gallon of ethanol before it's converted. Ethanol from corn costs about $1.74 per gallon produced, compared to 95 cents for gasoline for that grain. I'm not sure it is highly government subsidized, that's the only way they can do it. Because if we didn't pay these farmers all the raise up, they wouldn't do it. We're losing money on every gallon of ethanol we're producing. It doesn't make sense. We've got to stop doing it. Reduce it. That's if we want to make a big footprint, this is where we can start. Not putting any meat, but using it for fuel. Excellent. Food waste. In the U.S., we waste 120 billion pounds of food every year. That equates to almost 325 pounds per person. It's almost a pound per person per day. Wasted food causes 58% methane emissions that go into solid waste, because again, if I've got this beautiful bag of lettuce that I bought, but it's wilted and I didn't consume it fast enough, what do I do with it? Throw it in the garbage. What do those grocery stores think? They got the shelves full of fresh food that looks really good, but at night, they have to go in there and do what? Take everything that looks ugly out. Where do they put it? In the landfill. So, wasting food contributes 11% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Goes into the landfill, creates methane, but then also just all that fuel that goes into producing that food is wasted. That is a huge opportunity. We've got to do a lot better. Next slide. Wasting food in the U.S. causes greenhouse gases equivalent to those of more than 50 million gas-powered vehicles today. That is enormous. And part of the problem is we've, and I like eating green, fresh things as well as you do, but there has to be a balance. I remember being growing up on the farm, my mother, we were poor, and we produced a very bountiful garden, and we spent an enormous amount of time canning and freezing everything. That's what we lived on most of the year. Today, we probably both agree, we get lazy at times, so it's much easier to go to the grocery store and buy something than it is to raise it, process it. But at what cost? It's enormous. Next slide. This is a picture of my yard. Our house is over here on the right. You can see the car parked there with the Lawnmower pickup. This is a bluegrass yard. We own an acre, a little over an acre. We live north of town in Wheatland Hills. And at least about a third of my acreage looks like this right here. These gray plants is lupin. It's my wild area. I only mow once a year, at best. I let everything grow. My neighbors come to me and says, how did you plant that flower garden? No, I didn't. In June, it'll be bright blue because we've got flax growing all over the place. It turns to purple. I've got between 5 and 10 different native grasses growing in this, along with a whole bunch of wildflowers. And I'm sequestered carbon. That's my garden right there. You can see the raised beds. We've got some fruit trees, about over half dozen fruit trees, apple trees, cherry trees, apricots. Then I've got a strawberry bed. And so I will water this. This will not be watered. And so Mother Nature has to help me with that. But I know I'm sequestering more carbon here than across the wheat field over here because of the agricultural practices. So even in your own backyard, start looking at what's inside hitting. It's hitting pavement, you're not sequestering any carbon. It's got to be green. And kind of want it green. And because of, even with my bluegrass yard, I said I mow it. The last time I mowed it was September 1, I think. Somewhere in there, for September. With the rainfall we had, I've got green grass this tall. I didn't mow it. Now we got snow. Where do you think the deer are? They're digging through the snow, eating the green grass underneath the snow. It's still green. So even how we manage our yards, I don't spray for dandelions. The only thing I do ever spray for is Canadian thistle. Because it's a noxious weed, and our neighbors in our wheat fields to the north grow more convenient those all kinds of wheat. Next one. This is our garden. I keep everything, do the same practices that I was preaching. Keep the soil surface covered, do no-till. Barely break the soil surface to plant my crops. I love gardening. I hate weeding. To me, it was punishment when my parents sent me out to weed garden. Because it meant a lot of labor, a lot of work. You know what I discovered is by planting crops really close together, it filled every mold with a desirable plant. I don't have weeds. So I will intermix everything close together. You see there, that top bit up there? The radishes, lettuce, spinach, broccoli, peas, probably in that one row, I see peas in there. So I keep planting crops in there. This is a little bit later bed here, but I keep everything really tight. There's a thistle right there. As I said, I don't like thistles, but next one. Show this. Alright, regular group. Another one I want you to look at, this is again, I'll hand it out. Flyer. Route 78, you can see the devil down there. It's a trailer, it's a brand new film, just come out. It's a 4-part series that should come out this spring. I haven't given me a release date yet. But it is about some of these ranchers that I've worked with. It covers Canada, Montana, Nebraska, Kansas, all across, all the way to Mississippi. Down there about some of these successful practices. Next slide, Ron. Alright, so here's, I want you to think about. I'm running out of time. It is right, about 10 o'clock. On day 6, God placed man on this earth, so how can we restore, regenerate God, what God created? Should God, Hope's creation team promote regenerative agriculture? You need to tell me and others who are on this team that you are very deeply interested. Right now, it's not on there, I'm working with Brian, but we would like to create a whole section where you click on it, and it's got these videos, books, information, YouTube videos, anything you can glean information from. What is it you want or need to get more involved? How are you willing to become involved? We'd love to have you join our creation care team, right? Kathy? Sure. Who's all creation care team? Raise your hands. So look around you. Visit with them. Find out what we're doing and get involved. Would you be willing to join a study group on this subject? Commit to attending key film videos in this room or elsewhere revolving around regenerative agriculture. Join a book study group. Attend tours and workshops. I know a number of ranches here, farmers in the Mountain Valley and beyond, that all I do is make a phone call with their land son tour. Would that be your interest? And visit, connect with Montana producers for practicing regenerative practices and producing healthy crops. I was going to hand out an index card and some of those things, but I started a little bit late, so I'm running out of time. But communicate with us on the creative care team. Let us know what your desires and needs and wants are, and we will see if we can help meet those needs. Next slide. This is my final thought. And this is actually a quote from Bell Mountain, the Mountain Ranch. It's in Resilience issue number 44. You can download it. But this is a quote, now this just captures how I feel. This is still a statement. When asked if I'm pessimistic or optimistic about the future, my answer is always the same. If you look at science about what is happening on this earth and you aren't pessimistic, you don't understand data. But if you meet people who are working to restore this earth and the lives of the poor, and you aren't optimistic, you come down a pulse. What I see everywhere are ordinary people wanting to confront despair, power, and incalculable odds in order to restore some semblance of grace, justice, and dignity to this world. And that is it, folks. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know.